is still back up, so we'll follow that. That could end up being a factor in the election on Tuesday, but it's anyone's guess whether this latest noise sort of rattles investors to the point that they reflect it in their voting. To America Rising, PAC Executive Director Alexander Smith, who's also got Democratic commentator Danielle McLaughlin. Welcome to both of you. Alexander, this notion that the market's undoing is going to rattle the same voters who might have been predisposed to liking what they were seeing. It seems like a stretch to me either way. I don't think people respond on the upside any more than they would on the downside, but your thoughts?
So I think that the economy is sort of a double-edged sword for Republicans, because on the one hand, we have these great numbers, we have more jobs available than we have actually people to fill them. On the other hand, that could do one of two things. It could lull Republicans and conservatives into a false sense of security. Oh, I can stay home, I don't need to go out and vote because things are going so well. Or it could cause independent and undecided voters to start thinking about other issues. It sort of gives them the liberty to start thinking about other issues rather than their own pocketbook. So I think that the economy is sort of a double-edged sword for Republicans in that way. That being said, I do think that the stronger numbers tend to favor our chances in the midterms more than they hurt them. All
right. And one of the things that has been mentioned, and it's hard to get an early read on this, but in a lot of states, the swing states particularly, I guess this is more for Senate and gubernatorial battles because House races are district by district, that Republicans have tightened things up. We've also seen early voting benefiting Republicans early on substantially more than we did see even 4 years ago. Your thoughts on those noise makers there?
It's interesting because normally in this off year you do see far more energy from the party that doesn't have the incumbency, and all of the polling prior to, I would say, the last 2 weeks showed that Democrats really had energy. We had Kavanaugh, we had a lot of things that were really energizing Democrats. There's a couple of really close races that I think are particularly interesting to watch, and one of those would be Arizona. Pretty deeply red Arizona, the place of Barry Goldwater, of John McCain. We're in a sort of a statistical tie. It's going to be very interesting to see whether whether Martha McSally wins or loses there, and whether Sinema actually takes it. New Jersey is another place where I think Democrats actually need to be concerned, because now Bob Menendez is within the margin of error. So we're seeing
unheard of
in a deep blue New Jersey, but there were obviously issues with him, and voters will have an opportunity to say what they think about that next week.
You know, it's interesting to mention the Kavanaugh situation. It has galvanized Democrats as it has Republicans, each saying that their base was sort of offended. Who wins out on that? I'm already thinking in our fast news environments, it's Kavanaugh who?
Well, look, I think that the Kavanaugh hearings, to the extent that they are made to be about a larger argument, which is that if in a Democratic House or a Democratic Senate, you're going to get constant obstruction, you're going to get constant attempts to impeach both the president and Justice Kavanaugh. That's what some Democrats are talking about. I think that's a real turnoff to independent voters. But going back to Arizona, like Danielle was talking about, this is a really interesting race where the Democrats really thought that they had sort of an expanded map opportunity. And it hurts, especially that that Chuck Schumer's super PAC had to dump in $6.5 million into New Jersey to help Bob Menendez, when that could have gone to Kyrsten Sinema. I think what's happening, though, in Arizona is that the reason why the polls are tightening so much is that Kyrsten Sinema's past is sort of coming back to haunt her. She was like one of these Looney Tune, Iraq War protesters back in 2003. She actually summoned a witches' coven in Arizona to go protest
it's a dead even race, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, Martha McSally came out of a bruising primary to have to come back to that. Right. And so, I think that previously the Republicans, were a little less optimistic about this race than we are now.
What do you think of the president framing this sell-off lately on fears of Democrats taking the House? Now, whatever you think of the president, what do you think of that argument? I think that, and I don't agree with it, I think the Republicans will eke out just enough to maintain the House. I could be very wrong, but that fear has been sort of baked into the cake for quite some time. So what gives this new added immediacy?
Fear, right? I mean, you speak about fear, you think about markets abhor uncertainty, and I think some of what we're seeing is just the uncertainty in the lead up to the race. And, I have praised the president when I felt that it was worthy, and then I have some concerns about using this kind of thing to drum up fear. Right. In an ideal world, this is a battle of ideas, right? So
I think they're using names like Maxine Waters would be running the House Financial Services Committee. Right. That rattles a lot of investment folks. But again, I think people have known that for a while.
Right. And at the end of the day, if Democrats get the House, but they don't get the Senate, which, statistically is the most likely outcome here, we're not going to see an enormous amount of difference, I don't think, because we have a president who's a Republican who has veto power, of course, and then you have the Senate, and we can't pass legislation without both houses. So.
Which was your argument?
Yeah, I mean, the uncertainty sort of cuts both ways here. It cuts in terms of the economic effects that the market might fear from a Democratic Congress, which they should, given some of the talk that we hear about there. A lot of the Democrats in this particular midterm election went way to the left, talking about Medicare for all and free college tuition. There's a lot of big ticket spending items on the Democrats' list that ought to fear, or that investors ought to fear. That being said, I think that there's also a fear of political instability because the Democrats are very much talking about impeachment. This is Tom Steyer's campaign. He's given a lot of money to Democrats this midterm election. This is what Dianne Feinstein herself said that she would be open to impeaching Justice Kavanaugh. I think that that's the kind of talk
you might be right. It might start in the House. It's going to be very hard to close a deal like that in the Senate.
Right, you need a two-thirds vote. If it's a Republican control, it's never going to happen. And I think one thing that Democrats are being a little bit careful about, and that's the right thing, is wait for the Mueller report. Wait for the Mueller report. Let's not obstruct the Mueller report on one hand. Let's let the truth come out, and then let the American people make a decision through their elected representatives about what was done, what wasn't done, and how this should play out.
Soon after the election.
Yes, Politico is reporting that there is possibly a subpoena out there. Hard to say, of course. This is
subpoena of the president. That's right. All right, ladies, I want to thank you both very, very much. Take a peek what's happening at Corner Wall and Broad here. We're up about